let's talk about everyone's favorite and not so favorite Disney CEO. Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes of your day here with me. And today we are going to talk about Bob Iger. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a forewarning. This is part one of at least 2, maybe 3-part video series. The second part, which will be released next week. And Bob Iger has been back at Disney for a year. And his return to Disney has been a little mixed, if we're being perfectly honest. In fact, there's not been a lot of strong things that people could point to and say, oh yeah, Bob Iger is doing something really good there. There's been a few, but not as many as when he was the CEO the first time around. And seeing as how everyone's doing year-long report cards and basically giving him failing marks, I kind of want to do something a little different now that he has been in the company for a very long time. And I want to discuss the things that he did good in the company and the things he did bad. So in this video, we are going to talk about the top 10, or at least 10, these might not necessarily be in any particular order, things that Bob Iger did for the company that was a really positive thing. Now, here's the thing. Most of the time, we would be talking about the worst things first, well, let's get the bad out of the way first, and let's focus on the good afterwards. But unfortunately with Bob Iger, since his last year has been a little tumultuous, well, the bad we kind of need to talk about second, because, spoiler alert, even though Bob Iger has done very good things for the company, things that I think Disney fans, even those who hate him, would say this is a good thing, at the way things are right now, I do believe he needs to go. I don't think he's a positive for the company at the moment, and it's been that way for a little while. But before we start getting there, let's talk about the good things that Bob Iger did. Because, we always focus on the last few years, or they do something bad, and then we hyper-focus on that one thing as if it's the only thing in the world that matters. It is not. Bob Iger has done some good things, and let's take a few moments to talk about them. And if there's any good things he has done that you think I might have missed, feel free to comment below. Now, the first great thing that Robert Iger did for Disney, and it happened very early in his career, and I think this was at the very least a moral boost for the company, is Bob Iger made peace with Roy E. Disney. Now, you must keep in mind that while Bob Iger did not have a personal vendetta against Roy Disney had resigned from the board. He was kind of forced to resign. They enacted an age limit rule that only sporadically gets applied to employees, but nevertheless, he was forced out of the company, and he launched a Save Disney campaign to oust Michael Eisner and several of the board members who supported Michael Eisner. Now, his Save Disney campaign was fairly successful in the extent that Eisner had to give up his co-CEO role, or the CFO position, whatever it was. He had 2 titles, and he had to give up one of them. But he didn't actually successfully oust Michael Eisner the way he wanted to, and Eisner left on his own terms and brought in Bob Iger. Now, Iger had no personal reason to reach out to Roy Disney. He had no reason to make peace with him. He had no reason to settle. Roy Disney was in the process of suing the Walt Disney Company, but that would have been a very big uphill battle because Roy Disney really didn't have much of a legal claim to the Disney Company despite his name being on it, and his case was honestly pretty weak. And as Bob Iger wrote in his own memoir, he could have easily fought this battle and won. But what kind of message would that be sending to people? What kind of CEO of the Disney Company would he be if he fought Walt's nephew, who had ousted Ron Miller, brought in Michael Eisner, and really saved the company from doom, and was really just trying to do that again. So even though Roy was not made like a board member again or anything like that, he did settle. He made peace with Roy. Roy was brought back in as a consultant. They didn't actually have to listen to him, but he made Roy understand that, look, your contributions have not gone unnoticed, and we would like to continue to have your input going forward. It might be a small thing in some people's eyes, but in my opinion, that showed his character. And by the way, there are tons of stories of Bob Iger reaching out to individuals and expressing gratitude, concern, whatever. By all accounts, Iger is a very personal guy. That's why people like working with him. And I think the Roy Disney situation just highlighted that more than anything. The next thing I would like to highlight is that he brought Alan Horn out of retirement. Now, who was Alan Horn? Many of you might not have heard his name, but Alan Horn used to work for Warner Brothers and spearheaded a very successful several years at Warner Brothers, where movies like Harry Potter and The Dark Knight were released and several Clint Eastwood classics were made. And Alan Horn was forced to retire again due to age concerns. Well, Iger decided that Horn still had a lot to offer the world, and so he brought in Horn as the overseer of the movie business. And whatever you think of the movies that Disney made after the ouster of Rick Ross, which we will be talking about maybe in another video, Alan Horn did bring Disney theatrical back to extreme profitability. He nurtured talent. He didn't get in their way the way that other executives had. So Alan Horn was a great win for the Disney studio and company in general. And Horn is no longer with the company. He left when Iger left the first time. And I think the movie industry in Disney is feeling Horn's loss at the moment. The next great thing that Bob Iger did, he brought value back to the Disney stock. Now, most of you watching this probably are Disney stockholders. Disney stock is most of our first stocks. Our parents give it to us. They give us a share. They frame it, all that jazz. But for many years, the Disney stock basically stayed at around $30, $35. It really didn't go up very much. It didn't go down very much. It just settled. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, I would take a sturdy stock that is consistently paying dividends rather than a volatile one that is always going up and down and you're really just not sure where it's going to land. So I'm not saying there's nothing to a sturdy stock, but Iger managed to bring a lot of value to the stock to the point where it was almost $200 a share. So all those Disney shares that you had as a kid, the one that your grandparents were hoping that you could sell for a premium when you were older and in college year, guess what? Bob Iger made that possible. He made your grandparents' dreams come true. That Disney stock wasn't worth nothing anymore. It was worth something. Now, he did so by initiating things that I'm going to mention now, because there was a reason that stock went up, and that's because he brought value to the company. And one of the values he brought to Disney is he launched Disney Plus. Now, there's a lot of debate about the streaming wars. Do we need this many services? The prices are going up, ads are coming back. They, pivoted from physical media and theatrical to, all streaming, although I do want to add that was primarily during Chapek's era. I think Bob Iger would have been much smarter than to just give away fully completed and very potentially profitable Pixar films on Disney Plus. But at the same time, Disney Plus was a good idea. Like, hey, this is where you can get all the Disney movies. This is where we will have original series for Marvel, Pixar, and Star Wars. Like, Disney Plus is a great product, and the National Geographic section is great. So Disney Plus is great. It's kind of like a small little miracle whenever you launch a streaming service, and Disney Plus is a very, very good streaming service. There are some issues, again, that there's another video where we might be talking about some of these, but launching Disney Plus was inherently a good thing because it gave Disney fans a place to, in theory, find all of the Disney content. But again, there might be some room for that on the other list as well. But I don't think Disney Plus in and of itself is a bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing. Another great thing that Bob Iger did was he decided to reinvest and expand the Disney parks. Now, the theme parks this is one of those situations where some people might not see this as a good thing. They remember the parks when they were younger, and there are rides that are no longer there. It just looks very different these days, and so some people might say this is not a good thing that he did, but I would beg to differ. Because while I do remember like some rides that are no longer there, I also remember a theme park that was really in shambles. Like, okay, you don't like the fact that the submarines have been rethemed to Finding Nemo subs. Well, what was it before? It was nothing. Michael Eisner, in his cost cutting, decided to shutter it. Tomorrowland was falling apart. Like, go back to some of the articles about Disneyland from the early 2000s. Disney parks were not in a good place. They were literally falling apart. Attendance was way down. They did make Disney California Adventure, but nobody liked going to the park. It cost just as much as Disneyland, offered half the attractions, and many of the attractions weren't even very good. For some reason, Whoopi Goldberg was in like a lot of them. There was like a tribute to California video thing. There was a tortilla factory. And then there was this Hollywood ride where you could see a bunch of celebrities that Disney had contracts with. It's actually considered one of the worst Disney attractions of all time. And you can see some videos about that. I might even share a link up above of a video you can see about this. It was really bad. And when Iger came in, he knew that the theme parks were where memories were created. And right now there were no memories being created. And so he actually invested more money into the parks to revitalize California Adventure, to give Disneyland the upgrades it needed. And I think the effort does show. I mean, things work a lot better. The attendance is way up. And some of the new rides, particularly things like Rise of the Resistance, are so stunning. They really do recapture the Disney magic that the parks were known for bringing. Now, again, there are some issues with the parks, and we might talk about them in the other video, but we have to look at the fact that the parks were really quite neglected during Eisner's tenure near the end. He basically just wanted to save as much money running the parks as possible, and Iger brought that back. And by the way, under Iger, we even got the Disney passes, the annual passes that people love so very, very much. Although, again, they're a little different now, so, But, yeah, investing in the Disney theme parks, always a good thing in my book. Another thing that Bob Iger did that, well, maybe this didn't necessarily bring a lot of money or value to the company, but this was very much appreciated by Disney fans. He brought Oswald home. For those of you who are not aware, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was Walt Disney's first creation before Mickey Mouse. And in a situation that involved a little bit of backstabbing and back-swindling dealing, Disney lost the rights to Oswald to Universal, and he created Mickey Mouse, and the rest is history. Now then, Oswald has been owned by Universal ever since, or he had been, and the Disney family always wanted Oswald to come home, but no CEO had made any serious attempt because Oswald as a character, in terms of monetary value, is useless. Why would any CEO bother to try to acquire the rights to Oswald? And well, Bob Iger decided, as a gesture to the Disney family and the community and for our history, let's bring Oswald home. Now, the story behind that is a very interesting one. You can see it online as well as on the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit Walt Disney Treasure set. There's a whole story about how that took place. It's very funny. But at the end of the day, Oswald is now back at Disney. And interestingly, this is the one character that Disney does not try to modernize or update. They kind of realize that the charm of Oswald is his old-fashioned animation, things like that. So I think it's worked out pretty good so far. I mean, they still don't really know what to do with the character, but the thing is, he's home now, and he is available to future Disney fans for all to see. Another great thing that Iger did, now this one's probably going to be the most contentious for some of you hardcore Disney fans out there, And I want to remind you again that there is a second video, so there's another side of this. But I do believe that buying Marvel was a great thing for Disney to do. I mean, there were so many great characters under Marvel. They were making hit movies. The fact that they got them for only $4 billion when several of their movies alone, not even counting the merchandise, made over $1 billion, that is some serious forward thinking. And I have largely enjoyed the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially in its early days when they were doing something new and creative and they were making the movies that as a kid I had always wanted to see. Some people say that Marvel shouldn't be part of the Disney family. I disagree. Disney movies are about fantastical stories, good versus evil, and a journey to finding worth in oneself. These are the tropes that Marvel movies embody very well for the most part. And so I've really enjoyed many of the Marvel movies. I really love Spider-Man. I can't tell you how much I love Spider-Man, so I think this was a huge, great purchase by Iger. That being said, it's not as important or as significant as his purchase of Pixar. Now, Pixar is truly the company that was saving Disney. And here's the thing. I don't want you to look at movies like Emperor's New Groove and Atlantis and Treasure Planet and Brother Bear and Fantasia 2000 as bad movies. Most of those are very good movies, but there is something that cannot be denied. They financially were not successful. When Iger went to a Disney parade, he realized that none of the Disney created characters in the last 10 years were in the parade, but Pixar characters, were. And that's when he decided that things needed to change. Now, Pixar's deal with Disney was about to be up. Steve Jobs was very adamant about not working with Disney anymore because Michael Eisner screwed him on Toy Story 2. Look up that story on jimhillmedia.com if you want to see what that was all about. But Pixar movies had been holding Disney's theatrical animation boat afloat, if you will, and they were about to lose them. Fun story, the reason Ratatouille was going to be made after Cars was because Cars was to be Pixar's last film with Disney, and they wanted their first film against Disney to be about a mouse, and a little bit of, poetic justice, if you will. Well, Iger humbled himself to Steve Jobs, laid out all of his cards, and ultimately bought Pixar. And Pixar has been making classic animated films for Disney ever since. And it also led to the next great thing that Bob Iger did. He put John Lasseter in charge of animation. Now, Pixar, in a sense, was part one of a two-step process for Iger to reinvigorate animation at the Disney studio. First of all, he's buying Pixar, who are making these hit movies, but he also has access to John Lasseter. And John Lasseter is the closest thing to a Walt Disney we had these days. And he put Lasseter in charge of both studios. Now, while Lasseter has been accused of favoring Pixar over Disney, Lasseter also used his influence to get the rest of the Studio Ghibli films released after a certain individual tried to bury them. We'll talk about that in a separate video. He let 2D animation come back and produced The Princess and the Frog, which was a decent hit considering it was up against Avatar, for the highest grossing film of all time at one point. And Lasseter also approved many movies that ended up becoming classic Disney films like Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen and Tangled. So John Lasseter really helped revitalize the Disney animation studios, and he was also instrumental in bringing many of those movies and attractions to the theme parks because he had an eye for what would work in theme parks and what wouldn't, and he worked with Imagineering. John Lasseter really did a lot for Disney and Pixar that we're finally starting to feel now that he's not there anymore, but again, other video. And now, for the number one thing that I think Bob Iger did right, and this is something that I am kind of amazed Disney fans do not appreciate it. Whether maybe they don't appreciate it or maybe they don't realize it, but the thing is, Bob Iger, under his leadership, promoted Mickey Mouse to star again. And some of you might be going like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Disney's always been a star, or Mickey has always been a star. What are you talking about? Well, no. You have to understand the position Mickey was in before Bob Iger came along. Mickey was no longer a character at Disney. He was a corporate mascot. I think everybody can agree that Disney was a corporate mascot. Like, really, I don't think the studio had known what to do with Mickey for a long time. They made a couple animated short films like Prince and the Potter and Mickey's Christmas Carol in the late 80s, early 90s, but after that, they didn't really seem to know what to do with him. They did try to relaunch the shorts with Mickey Mouse's Runaway Brain. By the way, I love that short. That's one of my favorite Mickey Mouse shorts of all time. I thought that was like a great short to show Mickey's lovable personality, but it was also so zany and weird. Like, it brought him into a modern era. And that freaked the suits at Disney out. And they pretty much said, nope, no more. And so Mickey Mouse projects were pretty sporadic. I think we did get like, the Three Musketeers and things like that. So it's not like they weren't doing anything with Mickey Mouse, but Mickey had been sidelined. And if there's something that Walt Disney said famously, I hope we never lose sight of the fact that it all started with a mouse. Well, Bob Iger seemed to understand that, because when he came on board, a lot of Mickey-centric projects were pushed through. The Epic Mickey game was given the full green light. New Mickey Mouse shorts were made for many, many years. Mickey got a ride. Think about it. Mickey Mouse, Disney's biggest star, never had a ride at Disneyland. Now he has a ride at Disneyland and Disney World. I wish they would have put it somewhere else in Disney World, but that is a topic for another day. We also got the Clubhouse Mickey show. So under Bob Iger, and I know he's not personally creating all of these shorts and movies and games and things like that, but under Bob Iger, Mickey Mouse has been given prominence that he had not really had for a long, long time under Eisner and Miller. Mickey had kind of fallen the wayside, and Bob Iger realized it was time to bring Mickey back. It was time to put renewed importance on the character. This was their flagship character. And so I believe that that is completely overlooked by a lot of Disney fans, that Bob Iger, under his leadership, Disney became relevant again. And those are the 10 things that I believe Bob Iger has done that has been great for the company. And I would love to know if you agree, disagree. Now, again, if you have things like, well, why didn't you bring up this or this because, he did this bad, but because of this happened. Again, we have another video coming next week. In the meantime, though, did I miss anything? Well, I'd love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.